In yesterday's video, I talked about the fact that Paul made the gospel personal. In Romans 2:16, he calls it my gospel. Now, the gospel really isn't his gospel. The gospel is God's gospel. It is God's good news. But Paul had so incorporated the gospel into his life that it was indeed personal for him. But let's be clear. It was not personalized. It was personal, and the difference is substantial. Let me provide an example for us by talking about the first 4 books of the New Testament. Oftentimes, when we lump those books together, we call them the Gospels, or we call them the 4 Gospels. Now, what we don't mean by that statement is that there are 4 different Gospels, or that there are a plural of Gospels. We're just saying that there is a selection of literature that is pieced together that have a common name called the Gospels. If we want to identify one specifically, we might say the Gospel of Luke, or Luke's Gospel, or oftentimes we'll just say turn to Luke, with the implicit being turn to the Gospel according to Luke, and then a certain chapter or verse. Because we know that if we say turn to Luke's Gospel, we don't mean Matthew's or Mark's or John's. Likewise, again, in a generic sense, we're not saying the Gospels in a plural nature. But as we look at the Gospels, what most people do, and this is not a big thing, most people say, let's turn to Luke, and they don't really realize that the true title of each of those 4 Gospels begins with the words, the Gospel according to. Now, is that important? Well, it is important because, again, this is not personalizing the gospel. This is about making the gospel personal. The gospel according to Luke, the gospel according to John, is actually being brought directly from the Greek, where it says kata Lukan, or kata Yohanan, or kata Matthian, or whatever the case might be, with the word kata, K-A-T-A, meaning according to. So this is not Matthew's gospel. This is the gospel of God according to Matthew, as Matthew has written it down. And therefore we have 4 harmonious pieces that help us to make a puzzle fit together so that we can better understand the life of Jesus. Now, again, doing that is far different than personalizing a gospel. Personalizing the gospel is really about adapting the gospel to our own personal understanding, our own personal needs, or even our own personal desires. Well, sometimes teachers don't help this, and I've been guilty of this in the past. We'll read the Bible, and this could be true of anywhere in the Bible. We'll say something like, well, what does that mean to you? Now, what I generally do is I'll say, does anybody have any reflection? I do that a lot when we're watching videos on our Sunday nights, for instance. Initial thoughts, reflections. Because I do want to know what's in people's minds, but I'm not asking what it means to them because, can I just be blunt, it doesn't matter what the Bible means to you or me. The only thing that matters is what the Bible meant to God when it was written. What the Bible means to God right now. What God inspired the writer of the 66 books to write. What the reader or the hearer of the words originally heard. That's what truly matters. I often use an example similar to this one. Let's say that you and I were having a conversation in front of George Washington, and I made a comment to you that I hit the ball with the bat. Now, George Washington is going to probably scratch his head a little bit, and he's going to say something like, well, wait a minute, don't you mean you hit the bat with the ball? Like there was a bat, a flying animal, that you took a ball and you threw it because you wanted to kill the bat. You didn't have a shotgun with you to shoot it, so you hit it with a ball. No, George, I mean I hit the ball with the bat. He's like, well, I don't understand. Well, that's because George Washington died 40 years before Abner Doubleday created baseball. Now, I'm not saying people didn't hit balls with sticks and stuff before, but the terminology of a bat and ball is obvious to us today in the 21st century, but to George Washington it would have meant nothing. So if I'm going to convey something different to George Washington, I need to speak to where he would understand it. Likewise, words that George Washington would have used are going to be some of them will have a very different meaning than they would for us today. And because of that, we need to understand in their culture, the culture of the Bible 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago for parts of it, we need to understand what it meant to them before we can begin to understand what it means to me. Because God spoke to a people through His Word at a specific time, in a specific place, about a specific reason. That does not mean that the Bible does not transfer, that it's not good for us today. I'm not saying that at all. That's what's amazing about the Bible, is that the truths that are contained from 2,000 and 4,000 years ago apply to us so perfectly well today because they are transcendent, because God is transcendent, because His words are transcendent, because His Word is transcendent. So, but we must start by looking at what it meant to the writer, by what it meant to the people, in order to then begin to apply it to us. Now, as we begin interpreting the Bible, though, we might apply it different ways. There is only one correct interpretation, and I'm not saying that I have it right. In any given week, in any given day, I'm not saying that I have it right. But one right interpretation might be lived out hundreds or even thousands of different ways in application. That's where what the Bible means to me can come into play, not by the text, but how am I going to do the Word? Not just be hearer of the Word, but to be a doer of the Word. So what I'm going to do next week, in the 3 videos that I do next week, is I'm going to walk you through a little bit of my process of how I look to interpret the Bible. What am I looking for when I prepare a message, when I prepare a lesson? And I'm going to share that with you, not so that you have all of the insights, because in 3 days you can't. Not because I am the wisest teacher about this in the world, because I'm not. But I want to share with you just a little bit about how I dig into the Word so that I can have a picture of what God is trying to say through His words, through me, to you each week as I deliver a message or create a lesson or whatever it might be. So next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that'll be our videos after our Hub Sunday, so that you are better prepared coming from the Hub to better go out equipped to share the Word by knowing how to better interpret yourself.